Hello boys and girls, and welcome to lesson 2-1. We're on to chapter 2 and we're looking at integers in absolute value. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to evaluate these two. Evaluate absolute y plus 8 if y equals -7, or evaluate 9 minus 5 times absolute z if z equals 3. You should be able to do these by the end of this lesson. But before we get there, we must look at what we mean by integers and what we mean by absolute value. Well, let's look at the word integer first. An integer is any number from the set of any numbers from negative to positive. You can see -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Where means continuously indefinitely. So continues indefinitely meaning that it continues either way. Okay, it's a whole number that could be negative or it could be positive. All of these are integers. Okay, so negative integers are less than 0, as you know, and positive integers are greater than 0. And 0 is neither negative nor positive, but it's still an integer. So in reality, we're just talking about whole numbers. Positive or negative, those are integers. Okay? Now, what does it mean to have an absolute value? Well, an absolute value of a number is the distance the number is from 0 or a number line. So -6 and 6 have the same absolute value because -6 is 6 spots away from 0 and 6 is 6 spots away from 0. So they both have the same absolute value of 6. So when we write it out, we write absolute value around these lines, like that, like so. And then we write -6 is only 6 spots away from 0, and +6 is also 6 spots away from 0. So they both have an equal absolute value. In sum, the negative or the positive don't really matter when it's an absolute value. Now, when talking about absolute values and positive and negatives, integers, we have to understand some vocabulary so that we can understand if we're talking about -23 or if we're talking about +23. For example, here we have these integers, these situations with integers. Identify its opposite and describe what it means. When we have 23 Fahrenheit below 0, so less than 0, this means that this is -23. Below 0 is -23. Its opposite would be +23, which means 23 Fahrenheit above 0. That's the opposite. 11 inches more than normal. Okay, more means plus, because if the normal is 0 and we have 11 inches more, it's 11 plus. The opposite, see there's 11 plus, the opposite would be -11, okay, which means 11 inches less. So there's your opposite, more or less. Got it? So now let's try these two. A loss of 8 yards. If you lost 8 yards in a football game, it means you went back 8 yards. So it would be -8. Okay, a loss of 8 yards. But what if you gained? What if you gained 8 yards? If you gained 8 yards, you got 8. You can write it as a +8 or just simply write 8. A deposit of $15. Ooh, if you put $15 into your account, it means you have plus $15. Remember that the plus sign is optional. Okay? But if withdrawal means to take out money, so withdraw money from the account would be the opposite, and that would be -15. Okay, so let's get familiar with the languages. Deposit means to go in and increase the amount. Okay, withdraw is to take out money. A loss is to lose, to have less, and gain is to have more. We have to get familiar with these languages. Please make note as this is example 1 in your notebooks. Okay, I will be checking for this, and this is your first key answer. Okay, so put a star right there in your notebooks. Thank you. Let's go to example 2. Another word we need to become familiar with is the word inequality, meaning not equal. Okay, if we have it over here, as you can see, -5, and we have 4, we would write that as -5 is less than 4. Okay, that's an inequality. We could also write it as 4 is greater than -5. Okay, those are inequalities, meaning we do not have an equal sign. They're not equal. Okay, for example 2, we're going to do 2a and 2b, and we're being asked to write two inequalities. We've been given a line plot here, okay, with the negative numbers and positive numbers so that we can see where the numbers land. It's just a visual, but for some of you, this is not necessary. So you write two inequalities involving the number 1 and number 2, meaning you can write 1 is greater than negative 2, or you can write negative 2 is less than 1. Those are two ways of writing an inequality. So since 1 is on the right, this is how they're explaining how to use this tool here. 1 is on the right of negative 2, 1 is greater than negative 2. So 1 is greater than negative 2. Or since negative 2 is on the left of 1, negative 2 is less than 1, so negative 2 is less than 1. Now, again, they're just showing you how to use this tool, but for some of you, you can just visualize this in your head, or you simply just know the value of those numbers. Now here, replace the blank statement with less than or greater than or even equal. Okay, then you have negative 4 and negative 6. Well, negative 4 is greater than negative 6. Because here's negative 4 and here's negative 6, and this side is greater. Okay, since negative 4 is to the right of negative 6, negative 4 is greater. So negative 4 is greater than negative 6. Okay, let's try 2a and 2b. Okay, so let's do 2a together. We have write two inequalities involving negative 7 and negative 3. You know that negative 7 is further down on the line than negative 3, so this one's less, has a lesser value, right? It's a greater negative number than this one. So we can write negative 7 is less than negative 3, or we can flip it around. Negative 3 is greater than negative 7. Okay, question B. Replace the blank with less than or greater than or even equal in negative 1 blank 2. Well, negative 1 is less than 2. And this makes the sentence true. Alright, let's just add our key answer right there. It's not the prettiest, but go ahead and draw your flower next to your answers. Okay, example 3 on page 47, we find that Bethany and her friends played a question and answer video game. Their scores at the end of the game were 1, negative 5, 0, negative 1, 2, and 4. Order the scores from least to greatest. We understand that on the graph we have the least to this side and the greatest to this side, in this direction. So least, greatest. And you can see that we have negative 5 right there. Okay, right there's negative 5. Negative 1. Oh, right there. Negative 1. 0. 1, 2, and 4. Okay, so they were graphed as from least to greatest. Now, using the same method, now you don't have to draw this, but using the same method, I want you to take these temperatures, okay, from Niagara Falls and put them in order from least to greatest. Okay, so the recorded highs in degrees Celsius at Niagara Falls from February 21st to the 28th of a recent year are 4, 2, 3, negative 6, negative 5, negative 1, 0, and 1. Order the temperatures from greatest to least. Now here's a little interesting fact. Did you know that in order for it to snow, the temperature has to be between negative 3 and positive 3? So the temperature has to be within these 6 degrees in order for snow. If it's further down, if it's too cold, it will not snow. If it's too warm, it'll turn to rain. So let's order the temperatures together. It wants order the temperatures from greatest to least. So this time we're going to go backwards. Which is the highest number here, the greatest? I see that it's number 4. So let's put 4 there. Then we have 3 is the second greatest. Okay, so cross out 3. And then 2. And then I see 1 over here. Then 0. Okay, there's the 0. Then negative 1. Then negative 5. And finally negative 6. And there you have it. Okay? There's your key answer. Okay, on page 48 we're going to talk about absolute value. Now we already know the absolute value of a number is the distance the number is from 0 on a number line. So negative 6 and 6 have the same absolute value, as you can see here. This is the same distance from 0 as this distance, so they both have the same absolute value. So absolute positive 6 is 6, and absolute negative 6 is still 6. So they have the same value when we're talking about absolute values. So now we're going to evaluate some expressions. As you can see here, negative 4 is just equals to 4. When we're talking about this equals 4 in terms of absolute value. You see that right there because it's only 4 spaces away from 0. Okay, so then what is negative 8 minus 5? Well, since this doesn't matter that it's negative or positive because we're talking about absolute values, you can see by the lines, this has the value of 8 minus 5. Okay, so 8 minus 5 equals 3, as you can see. So keep in mind that we're talking about absolute value. We're talking about how many spaces from 0. So 8 spaces from 0 minus 5 spaces from 0 means there's 3 spaces from 0. So absolute value. Okay, so let's try 4a and 4b. Negative 3 and absolute value is just 3. Okay? And negative 4, absolute negative 4 minus 3. Well, it equals 1. Remember that when we're talking about absolute value, the negative doesn't matter, so it's 4 minus 3. That's 1. We can use absolute value notation with algebraic expression with variables. Okay, let's try those. So now we're back to the questions I presented to you at the beginning of the video. Okay, where absolute y plus 8 if y equals negative 7. Let's try that. Let's start by replacing the variable. Okay, so we have absolute negative 7, right? Because that's what we're being told y is, plus 8. Well, remember, in absolute value, doesn't matter if it's negative or positive, this is 7 plus 8 equals 15. Okay? Over here, 9 minus 5 multiplied times z when z equals 3. So 9 minus 5, replacing the z, replacing the variable, I have 9 minus 15. So 9, sorry, ignore that. So 9 minus 15 equals negative 6. Okay, for the guided practice, we are asked first to write what this means. Okay, so withdrawal of $500 means minus 500, and what would be the opposite of that? To deposit 500. Okay, let's do gain 4 pounds. It means to increase by 4 plus 4, and what is the opposite? A loss of 4 pounds. That would be the opposite. Okay, write 2 inequalities for each one of these. So you can write 2 is greater than negative 5, or negative 5 is less than 2. So write them both ways for all 3. Over here, replace the blank with less than, greater than, or equal to, okay, for all 3. Over here, organize these from least to greatest. Okay, so find the state that matches the least value, and then the state that matches the greatest value. Okay, I think it's this one, and then put them all in order. Finally, evaluate each expression. Okay, remember that we have absolute values, so negative 12 is how many spots this is from 0, and we know that it's 12. Okay, so you could just write a 12 right there, and then evaluate here as well, and so on, and then replace the variables. X equals 7 and y equals negative 6. Replace the variable and evaluate. We'll check these in class.